Hi everyone, let's solve this problem. Set matrix zeros. Given an m cross n integer matrix, if an element is 0, set its entire row and columns to zeros. You must do it in place. So let's say we kind of have this matrix and then we have to ensure that whatever cell has a 0, its corresponding column and row should all be 0. So this also has to happen in place. In place is nothing but we should not create a copy and then replace it. We just have to do in the same matrix given. So let's see how we can solve this. So now these are the rows, right? So let's say I'll have rows with its indexes 0, 1, 2, and then I also have columns 0, 1, 2. Now I'll iterate over all the elements. So initially let's also have all the values as false, and whenever we are iterating over all the elements, let's say I start here, I'll iterate it is 1, so we can ignore all the ones, we can ignore, and whenever we got 0, we are going to update our respective column to true and respective row to true. Then again we keep iterating. We know that all of them are 1, so we can just iterate over them and ignore. And now we will do one more iteration. So I'll start at this particular position and I'll check if rows or columns are true. Nothing is true. Say here in this case, if you observe, we have the column as true, so we are going to ensure that, let me just write it at the bottom. So it is 0, marked as 0. So let me just draw the entire part. Okay, so now again we'll go here, we'll check if this particular column or this particular row has true. Nothing has true, so we'll move again to the next row. So does this row have the value true? Yes. In that case, what we are going to do, we are going to mark it as 0, and then we are going to check the next cell. It is already 0. In the next cell again its row is 0, so I'll mark it as 0. Then I'll move to the next cell. Its column and row, both of them are false, I don't have to do anything. Then next cell, its column is false, that means I'll have to make it as 0. And then I'll move to the next cell, both its column and row value has false, so I don't have to do anything. And this is the final matrix we get. Though we have to do it in place, I just showed you in a different place for better understanding. Now this particular solution has time complexity of big O of m into n and the space complexity of big O of m plus n, right? And this will be 2 into m into n because we are iterating the matrix for twice, but overall big O, it will be just m cross n. And for the space complexity, if you see, there are m rows and n columns. We have declared an array of m plus n, so the space is m plus n. Now let's try to figure out a solution which has the space complexity of big O of 1. So for it to happen, instead of maintaining extra arrays here, we should just reuse the already existing spaces to denote if we have to mark that specific row and column 0 or not. So we can go ahead and check it now. If you observe, there is one cell which is kind of overlapping if I have to draw rows and columns. So basically we'll use first row and first column to ensure that whatever we were using as extra spaces. Now in this case, there is one particular cell which is kind of overlapping, so we will use one more extra variable to mark 0th row as true or false. So basically, if the particular cell has 0, then we have to mark its row or column with 0. That is the idea here. So let's say I'll start my iteration. So initially Okay, also I'll write the initial value, it as false. So I'll start the iteration. Here it is 1 1 1, so we can just ignore it. Now when I got 1 in the next cell, again we can ignore it. I got 0 here. When I got 0 here, I will make its row and column as 0, right? And then I'll move again, continue with my iteration. All of them are ones. Now I'll do my second iteration. When I'm doing my second iteration, again I'll start with 1. I'll check so it is 1, so we can, so next time when I'm starting with my iterations, I'm going to start with 0 1 2 0 1 2. So I'm going to start my iteration with this particular cell, because these two are the representation of rows and columns. So I'm going to start with this particular cell. I'll check if this is already 0, so we can ignore it. Now I'll move to the next cell. When I move to the next cell, what will I do? I'll check if its corresponding row value or corresponding column value is 0. Corresponding row value is 0, so I'll mark it as 0, right? And then I'll move to the next cell. Next cell is nothing but this. So when I kind of visit here, I'll check its corresponding column and corresponding row. Corresponding column is 0, so I'm going to mark it as 0. And then I'll move to the next cell, 1. So again we will check if its corresponding row or corresponding column is 0. None of them is 0, so it will be remaining 1. So why do we need this particular value is, let's say for example, instead of having 1 1 0, let's say 1 0 1, and we have 1 0 1. I'm just writing the initial matrix apart from this value. I'm just added this as 0. Let's say this is our given matrix. In this case, so let me use a different marker here. I am going to iterate over all the elements. This is 1, you can ignore. This is 0. When this is 0, we are going to mark our 0th row as, initially it would be false, so it will be marked as true. Now again I'll continue my iteration. This is 1, ignore, 1, ignore. It is 0, so I am going to mark its respective column as 0 and its row as 0. Now again I'll continue my iteration, 1 1 1 1. So we are done. Now while I am iterating over the next part, let's say this is my, I'll start from this part, right? Because these are the representations. So when I start here, it is already 0. When I have 1 here, I'll check its corresponding column and corresponding row. So row has 0, so I'll update my value to 0. And then again I'll move to the next cell. This is the next cell, and I'll check if its corresponding column or row has a 0, column has a 0. So what will I do is, I'll just update it to 0, and then I will move to the next cell. This is the cell, so I will check its corresponding column or corresponding row has a 0. No, it does not have a 0. So we are done with this processing. So we will also have to check this particular value. So it has a 0, first row as zeros. So in this case, I'm going to update all these values. So now the matrix looks like this. So this is what we have to do, right? Let's write the code for it. You'll understand it even better. So let's say for example, rows is equals to matrix dot length and columns matrix of 0 dot length. Then we are going to iterate over all the cells. So let's also write first row has 0. Initially it will be false, right? If matrix of ij is equals to 0, matrix of so basically this is updating the columns. So that is nothing but this particular cells, these are columns. So I'm going to update whenever I see a 0, I'll update accordingly for the columns. But for the rows, if I is greater than 0, it's same, matrix of I comma 0 will be 0. That is nothing but these two cells, right? But if it is equal to 0, then in this case we are going to update this particular value, else first row has 0 will be true. Once we are done with iteration of all the cells and have got this particular values, this particular column and this particular column and this particular row with all the values and this particular variable being updated, once it is done, we are going to iterate over all the elements again, but we will start with first row and first column because these are the values which we need to depend to update the rest of the values, right? Because of which we are going to start with 1 cross 1. So I'm going to start with j1 and j less than columns j plus plus. Now if matrix of its respective column or row is 0, in that case I am just going to update my cell value as 0. Then we will have to check the first row and first column. If let's say I have first row has 0, in that case I am going to iterate over all the columns and I am going to update 0th and column as 0. If matrix of 0 0 is 0, that means I have to update all my rows with 0. So let me explain. So let's say for example, as I mentioned, if there is any value 0 in this particular row, we are going to update this particular variable. Let's say for example, if there was a 0 anywhere in this particular column, we also have to update it. So that will come from 0 0 cell. So that's what we are checking for 0 0 cell, and then we are iterating over all the rows. If this particular value is 0 0, if this particular value is 0 0, I am going to iterate over all the rows and mark all of them as 0. If this particular variable is true, in that case I am going to mark all this column values as 0. So we are done. Let's try to run this code. Let's submit it. Okay, we kind of got a wrong answer. Let's check. So we are iterating over all the rows and column and we are checking matrix of ij is equals to 0. If it is equals to 0, matrix of 0 and j, we are updating the column to 0. If I is greater than 0, in that case matrix of I comma 0 equal to 0, but if it is equal, okay, and then we are iterating over rows and columns, and if I of 0 or 0 of j equal to 0, that means we are kind of marking it. If we have first row less than columns, if matrix of 0 0, we are updating the values. So why is it not working? Okay, first of all we have to mark the columns, and then we have to use the row, because if we are doing this first, that means we are kind of overwriting the value here. Then we are going to overwrite the other values as well. So let's try to run this, submit it. Cool, it works. Okay, let me explain why this happens. Let's say, for example, if I have let's say this is the cell. Based on this, if I have already updated 0 0, that means I will update this particular value as 0 irrespective of it was 1 or 0. So it should not happen. First we have to complete our columns, then we have to update our rows. That is the reason it was failing. And okay, now let's also understand the time and space complexity of this. Time complexity of this solution is big of m cross n, and the space complexity is big of 1, as we are not using any extra space in this case. I hope the solution is clear. Thank you.